So let's start with the global number of cases and Dr. Fauci's comments. What do we know?
Well, that's right. He was saying yesterday that the start of the turnaround could come after this week, and that's in line with what some officials in other countries have been saying, which is that they think, or they hope as well, that the peak may come in several key countries in 7 to 10 days from now. But of course, the global cases have topped 1.5 million. That's the cases that have been reported that we know, and they've gone up by 500,000 in less than a week. And even as the death rates, of course, spike in several countries, including the UK and the US, the new cases are also going up again in a couple of places, including Italy and Spain. And so you get a couple of days of what seems to be a bit of a plateau in new cases, and that now we're seeing fresh increases in several places. And that's got to be cause for concern for health officials who want to see, of course, like a trend really emerging with multiple days. And so it seems to be far too early for some of these countries to say they're coming through the worst of it.
Exactly, and particularly for the UK, Ros, which of course we've been saying saw its deadliest day so far. Prime Minister Boris Johnson is still in intensive care. What have we learnt in terms of when the UK lockdown might end or the extension? Some officials saying that it might go on for weeks. We're in the 3rd week now.
Well, that's right. And of course, the lockdown period it technically ends on Monday of the coming week. What we're hearing from officials in the UK government is that they're seemingly coalescing around the idea of keeping the lockdown on for at least another 3 weeks, and that's fully so no restrictions lifted at all. That's partly because the death toll continues to rise. It's also because they believe that the peak in infections is still, at least 10 days away, and partly also because it's a major decision to make in a country that is right now still without its leader. Boris Johnson, as you said, spent his 3rd night in the critical care unit. His officials are saying his condition is improving. He is relatively stable, but he remains in ICU and will probably remain in hospital for at least some time yet. So you've got a government that's still needing to make these decisions, but without Boris Johnson at the helm.
Yeah, and Ros, in the UK, of course, as we've just talked about, the exit strategy seems some weeks away, but nonetheless, there are discussions over what that would look like. In Europe, Germany and Italy are debating over an end to their lockdowns. What's being discussed and how exactly would it work, given, as we've heard, we haven't really seen the peak yet in Italy or Spain?
Well, that's right. So, again, they're sort of saying that they're very tentatively starting to discuss those questions of how, when, and so on to end their lockdowns. It seems that one of the clearest roadmaps, of course, is to keep schools closed for longer, because the last thing we want is young people mixing together in one contained space. The main thing is probably to get people working again and to get economies moving again, and to leave some of those other restrictions on for longer. Italy, for one thing, is looking at keeping schools closed all the way through to September, to what would be the start of the new academic year. These countries are looking at places where the virus, it doesn't appear to be as strong, so some regions, some towns, and can you start to resume operations there in terms of businesses, factories, and so on. Of course, the problem for Italy is that the manufacturing area is the one that's been the hardest hit, and still so, but can you start to open up small retail spaces, restaurants and so on, at least to get small businesses resuming in parts of Germany and Italy, and that seems to be the focus, even as schools are expected to stay closed for a longer period.